Hey everyone. In this video, I talk with Cedric Engels, author of the very fascinating book called The Power of Sound, co founder of a sonic agency called Sonhouse, and an overall very interesting person when it comes to sonic branding. We talk a lot about Cedric's story, how he got into sonic branding, but also what the role of sound is for human beings, how it works, like how it influences us. But of course, we talk a lot about brands as well, how they can use sound, how they can build a strategy, and how they can fit in sound, and that how sound relates to other assets such as visual assets and so on. So it's a very interesting conversation on the power of sound. I've added some chapter markers if you feel like skipping around, because we do get it to the little bit of the weeds of Cedric's backstory and how he got into this whole field, which is interesting. But if you like to skip to the part where it's just about sonic branding and sound, just use the markers and hop around. So I really hope you enjoy this video. And as always, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because there's gonna be a lot more videos. Enjoy! For the people that don't know you, Cedric, could you introduce yourself real quickly?
Yes, I'm Cedric, in the middle of a corona crisis where my hairdresser is closed, as you can see. I'm most of all a father and a happy husband, and I'm really passionate about sounds since I was born, actually.
Awesome. I know I read your book, The Power of Sound, which was really fascinating to me. So it
Thank
was something like where I started paying more attention to sound. So thank you for that. But like, how did you get in this whole field? Because it's something very specific to land into. Like, what's your story, and how did you end up in this world of sound?
Well, actually, it all started with a personal story that I know since a few years only. And the personal story is my great grandfather in the beginning of the 20th century. He went to work every day with his bike, and one day he was approaching the railway crossing, and he couldn't hear the train coming. And that was actually the end of my great grandfather's life, unfortunately. My great grandfather was deaf.
Oh,
So that had a huge impact on my life. So I started to investigate the power of sounds, and that's how I got to the book and further investigation. But of course, since I only know this for a few years, there is another starting point, being me at the age of 12, where I was in love with a girl at school, typical. And I had this strategy not to approach her directly, but via her brother, and her brother was a DJ. So I started DJing together with the brother. The girl, I wasn't interested anymore. I was more interested in DJing. So then I started a band, let's say, with my brother when I was 13. Um, then I started to make own music. Of course, my dad was really worried. He thought, "Oh no, this world full of drugs and alcohol, and it's dangerous." So I had this deal with my dad. If my grades were okay, I could follow my passion. And then he told me, "Look, boy, once you turn 18, you can do whatever you want." So when I got 18, I told my dad we had a deal. So I will follow my passion. I can do whatever I want. I want to become a musician. And then he told me, no, you can do whatever you want, but you need to pick between becoming a lawyer, a scientist, a doctor, or an engineer. And I said, okay, I'll become a sound engineer, but it was no. So then I decided to study law, which was perfect because I could focus on IP and copyright law. There was a link with my passion. But more importantly, I didn't have to go to class, so I could still make music and DJ. So once I got my master in law after 5 years and my specialization in IP, I jumped on the first train to London to actually follow my passion. Unfortunately, my dad passed away in the meantime when I was 19. So that was also my motivation to get my master in law. But this sort of gave me the freedom. I mean, if I could make a choice, of course, I'd prefer my dad to be back. But because of this thing happening in my life, I had the chance to jump on that train to London.
Mhm.
And then I studied music at Middlesex University, SAE. Then I worked at a record label, and I was in an identity crisis. Like, who am I? Am I a lawyer? Am I a musician? My friends were growing up. I was still this child playing with knobs and synthesizers. So this was a very hard time for me. But then I read Brand Sense by Martin Lindstrom,
Mhm.
and maybe it's not as a strong starting point for a business idea, a book, but still that's the most honest version I have. And I was really triggered by this idea of multisensorial experiences, but most of all sound, because visual identities, it's something logical to have a
Mhm.
visual logo and to think about, yeah, all things that are visual. But
Mhm.
sound, as it was my passion, I thought, why shouldn't we see sound on a higher level, on a strategic level, link it with personality, with identity, with the world of brands, the world of films. So then I started my own company in 2012.
Awesome.
So that's
And
a short story long, or a long story short, I don't know.
it's a beautiful story. I mean, there's so much in there that's personal, but it came to something that's really about a business, which is, I think, very fascinating. Like, could you tell us a little bit about the fact that you went into this field of, let's call it, sonic branding, and we can talk about that later. But like, because I can imagine when you're in the whole space of music, there's more people probably interested in like becoming a big musician and playing the guitar and writing songs and I don't know what, all of this good stuff. There's people saying, I want to get into creating sounds for brands. Like, what made you make that choice, and maybe how did that, besides the book, because you mentioned that, right? And like, how did then you started the actual company, and tell us maybe a little bit about that as well.
Well, at some points in your life, you approach crosspaths, and
Mhm.
I had this point where, like I said, identity crisis, lawyer, let's say, or musician. But within the path of musician, there were two other possibilities. Following my career that I had built with my brother under the name Hermanos Inglesos, or following like a bigger dream or a bigger belief. You have to know that when I had this crisis moment, I was already DJing for 12 years. So that's a
Mhm.
long time. Be in
Yeah.
clubs, festivals, touring. But at that point, we had, let's say, a modest hit. But that started to grow also in the States. It's called Self Control, and now we have like more than 4 million streams. So that song and the career that we have built had the potential of getting bigger. But
Mhm.
I do believe in focus in life, and I wanted to evolve and focus on the sonic branding aspects, because I saw that there was like yeah, a white page, or like a fertile soil or something,
Mhm.
where the opportunity was there to convince brands that they should think about sounds on another way, and on
Yeah.
a on like I said at the start of this conversation, on a higher level. And yeah, I really had this urge to convince people. um, and also you have this in London. You have a lot of in the parks. You have a lot of preachers and people who are spreading their beliefs. And I was inspired. Like, I really believe in this, and I want
Mhm.
to convince people. First, my brothers, my mom, my family, then the friends, fools, and family. You know
Yeah.
how it goes. Saying, but then other people. So yeah, it was like a challenge that I wanted to go for.
Yeah, I love that. Maybe let's talk about the actual business you built later on, but maybe first let's take a look at sound, because a lot of what you're talking about is really about the power of sound and what it means for us human beings. Like, just give us an idea of what sound is and how it impacts us as human beings.
Yeah. Well, maybe the power of sound could seem obvious. I don't know if many people already left the podcast now or the video. I don't know, because maybe they think, yeah, the power of sound, of course, but there's way more than people know. For example, I don't know if you remember, Steph, but you were in your mom's womb. Sorry to put it this way, but you were there one day. I don't know how many years ago, but your eyes are closed,
Mm-hmm.
but your ears were already open. Between the 17th and the 19th week of pregnancy, there's already this development of your ears. And so the very first sound that you ever heard is the heartbeat of your mother. And then, yeah,
Gonna close my eyes, get back to it. That's so
so
comforting, actually.
yeah, it has this effect. It gives you also a feeling of peace, and it gives you a feel of security, let's say. Something that car manufacturers apply as well. Like when you're in a car, you're like in a womb. Also, luxury cars, they have a different sounding regarding doors than cheaper cars. But yeah, now we're talking about something else. But this heartbeat story for me was something really fascinating. And then when you go deeper, maybe it's a bit of a philosophical topic, but yeah, in the end, life is vibration. The Big Bang was vibration. Sound is vibration. Um, if you talk with people, if you hear sounds, there is the speed of 343 meters per second, and sound is everywhere. So again, you can close your eyes, but you can't close your ears, or you have to do like this or put stuff in it. But then still you would hear or feel something even when you put stuff in your ears. So yeah, that was also my insight that the power of sound is underestimated.
Sound as a craft, like, how do you make sure that sound has the right impact? Is there some things we can pay attention to?
um, I found it really important to think about this from several point of view. So you have a creative point of view, you have a
Mm-hmm.
strategic point of view, but you also have a scientific point of view, being the objective knowledge that is in books, that it has been validated.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it starts with the last part. What is the impact of certain frequencies, of certain sounds, of certain notes, of certain parameters, tempo, rhythm, melody, key. Um, so that's one thing, that you just need the knowledge to know what you're actually
Yep.
doing. Um, and then there is a strategic point of view, like understand a project, a brand, a movie, a story, whatever. And then there is the creative part, where I really believe that the human touch can make design unique. Otherwise, we would just put some formulas, press enter, and the algorithm produces a new Beatle hit, new Beatles hit. But I think these three elements is like, let's say, the Holy Trinity.
Yeah, and so it's inherently tied to human creativity, and I think that is interesting, because we see on, for example, the branding layer, visual identity, we see a lot of things like AI generating logos, and probably that's happening in sound as well. But like, to have that, it's still something interesting that we as designers or people that engineer this have this touch that's very hard to achieve by an algorithm. I don't know if you see that maybe one day there will be computers just creating hit songs. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think there is this one aspect, being emotion.
Mhm.
I do believe that AI already is intelligent enough to make potential hits based on all the knowledge and the data
Mhm.
dump has been gathered. But yeah, again, the human touch and really understanding emotion, to me, is like the 1% that can turn it
Yep.
into a true authentic hits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So the robots, they won't conquer yet.
We'll see about that. No, no,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Maybe just talk a little bit about sonic branding and what that is as a discipline, because we hear it. I've been hearing it a lot more, I think, in the last 3 to 4 years, but maybe I'm very late to the game. But yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think the easiest way to understand is by creating an analogy. You can ask the question, what does a brand look like? I
Mm-hmm.
prefer to ask the question, what does a brand sound like? So that's the opposite of a jingle. A jingle has like a bad connotation. A jingle is something short that mostly is created for a certain campaign or certain products, while sonic branding really starts with understanding the brand, doing a deep dive into the brand book, the competition, the brand personality, brand values, like yeah, um, a decent study on a brand. And after that study, there is a methodology by applying a workshop where you can get certificates that prove that your workshop is valid. And during a workshop, you can make the translation of a brand into sound characteristics. Sorry, uh, and then you actually create a song. So, what is sonic branding? Sonic branding is a brand translated into a song.
Okay.
And this song mostly is around 1 minute up to 2 3 minutes, and this is like the entire universe, the entire translation of the brand into again a song. And then this is the fundament to make declinations. And a jingle, what I prefer to call like a sound logo, is like one declination.
Okay.
But then you can make other adaptations. So then you have the sonic branding at brand level, and then you go to the campaign level. You can make another version for music on hold, for a mobile application that could be more minimalistic or more serene, for a television campaign, for a radio commercial, for a podcast, for employer branding. So all these different contexts need another interpretation of the song, but it's always the same melody, always recognizable, just like the visual logo.
Love that. Yeah. I was like, I like the idea of it starting with that song as it being like the baseline or the whole story, and then making like small, it does remind me a bit of like, let's say, a visual identity, which is you have like the guide, the logo, the colors, the typography. And if you put that all together, that's probably the song, but you can also have these assets apart. I don't know if
Yeah,
I'm comparing it right, but
yeah, it's yeah. Actually, you should have answered your own question. uh, yeah, it's like you stated it. It's like a a sonic brand book. Also, it's
yep.
the blueprint of the brands, but then
Yep.
from a sound perspective.
Hmm. Why is sonic branding important? I mean, for brands, like, what does it do? Because you might say, like, a lot of people, as you mentioned earlier, like a lot of brands, they clearly invest in the visual layer or the marketing or communication layer or whatever. But why should they invest in this layer, and what can it do for brands?
Well, based on the knowledge that we got thanks to the power of sounds, we understand that sound is everywhere. So brands are heard. If you communicate as a brand, you produce frequencies, you produce sounds. And that's the first step. A lot of brands are not even aware that they are producing sound, which has like a big impact. Um, it has an impact emotionally. How does a person relate to your brands? Does your sound or music evokes an emotion of cold or of happiness or quirkiness, or there are several other emotions? Also, physical impacts. Some sounds can even give you a feeling of stress because they produce the hormone cortisol. Um, and yeah, if brands don't have a sound strategy, they are potentially um, turning clients into unhappy people. So it should be something that is created um, on the brand and that really fits the entire story, so that the entire story makes sense with all senses, not
Yeah.
only visually.
It's funny you mentioned like a sound strategy, because I often use like sound in the sense that it makes sense, and it's kind of like you need a sound strategy. It's a funny wordplay in that. Never
Yeah,
thought about that. So yeah, a lot of brands, similar to having visual assets that are already out there, like whether you want to have a brand or not, it's already out there in some ways because it wasn't thought of before. But for a lot of brands, I can imagine they already had sounds out there that people even recognize, but maybe they don't even fit their current idea of what it should be. Like how do you deal with those sounds that are out there as a brand? And you have some
uh,
examples maybe as well.
yeah, interesting question. I think an example that pops my mind straight away is the Apple startup sounds.
Hmm.
um, I don't know if you have it. Don't know
Of
if you have
course.
a
Here we go. Ah, the sweet, sweet Apple sound.
gives you an emotion also. um, I found this story really inspiring. Jim Reeks was working at Apple, and he was just like me, passionate about sound, but also a big believer. And one day he went to Steve Jobs and he said, "Look, Steve, I really want to implement sound into the new Macintosh computers." But Steve was like, "No, I'm working on design. I'm working on the operating system. I'm not really a big believer that we need these kind of sounds." So what did Jim Reeks do? Overnight, he created the sound that we just heard, and it's based on the last chords of the Beatles song "A Day in the Life." Uh, I won't sing it right now, but maybe you can look it up. But it has the same chords. Yeah, also because the Beatles had a label Apple, and then he made the name So Sumi, like in a phonetic way of writing it. So it was actually a joke, but in the end, Jim Reeks put the sounds in all the Macintosh computers, and it became like the iconic Apple startup sounds. Also, he sampled his Canon camera, which is the sounds that you hear when you take screenshots.
Oh yeah.
uh, there was also the sound created when you send an email and you hear the whoosh. So all these sounds relate to the product, relate to the brands, but I'm quite sure that there wasn't a real strategy, as it was the gut feeling of one person to introduce these sounds. And then to answer your question, yeah, if you put a mirror and you have defined your brand, does the sounds that we created years ago fit the brand?
Mhm.
Um, I think the first step is what heritage has been created. How many people know this sound? How many people relate to it also in a positive way, being a brand match? And how could we maybe adapt the existing sound to make it more on brand or more appropriate? But I would be very careful with throwing away what a brand has built over years, because it
Mhm.
takes so many resources to build a brand. So I would first of all, yeah, advise not to throw stuff in the bin just like that because you think it doesn't fit anymore. Consider it as a building block to let it, yeah, to have an evolution, let's say.
Yeah, and I think that's true because especially with sound, there's like this almost visceral thing where it's like when you hear something that's really familiar, like that Mac sound, it's just like it immediately conjures so many things, which is I think very powerful when it comes to sound. And I even I don't know if there are science behind this, like if sound is more impactful on our emotions and thoughts than, for example, visuals. I don't know if you have found any research on that.
Yeah, there are a few articles that state that the impact of sound is bigger and faster than visual triggers. I don't know the numbers by heart, and I'm not 100% sure if this has been validated by many scientists. So
Hmm.
I tend not to say this because it's a difficult matter to prove.
Hmm.
Uh, but I'm already very happy if people would say that sound is as important as visual stuff, then I'm already a happy man.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we can get into that because I'm wondering like how this whole digital revolution technology, how that has changed the impact of sonic branding and the whole role of sound for brands.
Yeah,
Could you give us some idea on that?
yeah. I think the day when this was invented, smartphone, um, made me realize that there was a possibility for me to start an own company. When smartphones were developed, I realized that people had speakers in their pockets. So sound, basically. Of course, there is technology evolving and the digital world, which allows everybody to create sound. I mean, you are hosting your own podcasts. Imagine 10 years ago, you would need like a big mixing console and high-end expensive stuff. And now for I don't know how many bucks,
An
but I
apple
think
and
it's
an
not
egg, as we say, for an apple and an
Apple.
egg.
So that the bad thing that's the entry to market is really low.
Yes.
The good thing is I think it got democratic, and then the challenge is to stand out. And I saw new possibilities by having sound everywhere to really develop the sonic branding methodology and the strategy parts. Uh, yeah, to make sure that you could um, develop sound identities in a really professional way. So I think thanks to the smartphones, sonic branding is more relevant. Before it was just you're a big brand, you have a lot of money, or you're producing a very big movie with a big budget. Um, but now brands are not only communicating on radio and television. No, even more. There is an evolution towards online, social media, other touch points than the classical expensive radio and television IDs.
So you see the sonic branding is something that will probably only keep growing. And maybe like do you think it's also becoming more and more relevant for smaller brands?
Um, I always say to people, based on the Mozart quotes, the music is not in the notes, but in the silence in between. So the yeah the how do you say this, the toetssteen, the touchstone,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the
The
it has to be
cornerstone. I
better.
think it's called
Yeah,
cornerstone, right?
you have to compare it with silence, and if what you produce is better than silence, you should consider sonic branding for your brand, but it has to be relevant. I mean, if you are building a company, a web company that only has like a website and that's it, maybe it could be annoying that people hear music the whole time when they're visiting the website, or it should be functional and it should improve the experience and it should convey the brand message. So it's important to be really careful with this and not to produce noise and sound pollution, because then again you're doing a big failure as you're annoying people.
Yeah, it shouldn't be like this.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting what you mentioned about silence, because you would almost think that maybe somebody like you who's like a big proponent of sonic branding would just say to everybody like, yeah, you just need sounds and you need mogos and all that stuff and everybody needs it. And I'm happy that you say that it's very much about like contextual, how do you communicate and where, because I do feel that once this idea of sonic branding is becoming something popular, which I guess it's kind of growing on people, that maybe all of a sudden all brands think, okay, we need all this sound thing, but they have no idea how to actually like put it out there and do something with it. So it needs to be valuable to the consumer. I think that's important.
Yeah. And also, I think once the sonic branding has been created, the second part to me maybe is the most important part. That's how will you implement this? How will you do the management of the sonic branding in a long-term relationship? It can be dangerous to use the sonic branding in a yeah, in a wrong way, just like a visual logo. It's
Hmm.
a classical thing where a designer develops a great visual identity with a holistic vision, and then the brand applies it themselves, uh, while they're forgetting like the guidelines, and suddenly you see a logo in a wrong corner or wrong color use or with a wrong font, and then yeah, you have a problem.
Yeah, I guess,
So
and I guess
more that
it's
you know
tricky.
how to use
Sorry.
it.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah, it's
it,
important you know how to use it. Yeah.
yeah, I guess it's trickier for brand managers to work with maybe sound assets just because they're not as used to it as visual assets. I'm not sure about that, but it's just a hunch.
Yeah, or if third parties work with it, I'm always happy if a lot of people work with it, but then they need to read the guidelines, and it shouldn't be like a creative corset or anything, because I
Hmm.
think it's important that creatives need also their space, and not having like this uh these boundaries of sonic branding. But sonic branding is more about, if music is um let's say your entire computer screen, sonic branding would take like a small bits where you can work in, but still
Hmm.
big enough, but with a few rules. Otherwise, yeah, it's everywhere. It's
Yeah, no,
going everywhere.
it's the whole brand experience, and yeah, it's a big part of that. And I think that is interesting, like if you have, let's say you have retail stores or whatever, that you maybe even consider thinking about the music you're playing in your stores as maybe being a little bit part of that. I don't know if that's how far you actually go in this idea, but I've been thinking about that, like when I walk into stores, like is this music being chosen consciously or not? Most of the time it's not, but
Yeah, you have brands that are really working on this. For example, McDonald's music is always loud and quite crappy. Why? Because they don't want you to stay there. They want you to order a burger, eat, and go out as fast as possible. But if you go to Harrods, you would hear in certain on certain floors classical music that give you a feeling of a premium
yep.
experience. And there is research done that states that people spend more money when there is this premium, more expensive music playing. Also, there is a test that has been done in a supermarket in the wine division. They were playing French music, and a few hours later they were playing music from Austria, and then they saw that the wines related to the region that the music was referring to. So subconsciously, music is doing stuff. If you are driving your car and you put music really loud, you will drive faster. Um
Yeah, I
it's
love
just
that.
like that.
We could
Impact.
have, like, if we have smart cars, we could make sure that, like, on when they're driving on the freeway, we could limit all cars' volumes and sort of sounds to make sure they're not speeding. Although I don't think that's very liberal to think about. Maybe let's talk a little bit about voice, because I guess that also plays an important part in this whole story of sound. I mean, the way we speak is basically generating sound. What is the role of voice within this whole spectrum?
Um, to me, sonic branding is built on three blocks. Let's say you have sounds, which is more abstract. For example, the sound logo of Audi is just like a heartbeat. Then you have music, which is melody, and then you have voice. And the last category has been growing for the last 3 years, thanks to again smartphones, but also smart speakers. Voice assistance, voice recognition is a thing. I think in Belgium it's like still a fetus, but in the States I think it's more common. Definitely, if you see how the young kids are communicating with products and so on, and their voice is so important because you're communicating also with the brands. And voice to me, like I said, is sonic branding, because a brand to me also is a person, and a person has an expression with a voice. There is this example of Obama, Yes We Can. but there is another historic example of Martin Luther King.
I have a
Um,
dream.
yeah. So the way he puts these words, like the phrasing, the tonality, he's almost like singing. Also, this phrase has been used a lot in music, where
Yeah,
DJs were.
it's like I immediately go to like a lot of cool house summary
Yeah, yeah,
remixes where this just was a part of the sample was played so many times. It's funny how that context completely changed for me when I hear that sample.
yeah. It's the power of voice, but to me, this is also sonic branding, and voice is so important, and also, yeah, the art of speaking, the rule of the silence that Mozart stated applies as well. Like when you have silence, it's really powerful.
No, that I mean that's so important, and I think we tend to forget that last part a lot, like silence being a very important thing. And I even noticed when I'm podcasting, like sometimes it's hard to leave room for silence because we're used to it being a little bit awkward, but it does create better conversations often, like when you do that. So that's really like when you're working with brands, do you look at the voices they have, or do you prescribe them like a tone of voice? I know we're getting a little bit abstract here, but like I'm interested in how that actually works.
Well, for example, Audi has a really extensive sonic branding strategy, going from their sound logo to the authentic sounds that are recorded um, car by car, model by model. They have a huge database, but also for their brand voice. You could say, is it a man? Is it a woman? Is it something else? Is it young, older, warm? So you could have like a tone of voice for a voice brand. Um, but I find that this field could already restrict the creative freedom. So I think if you have a set of rules for a voice, it should, yeah, leave some space for,
Yeah.
like you said, the context. It has to stay relevant, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine it being like, because each person also, like if you're looking for a voiceover artist or anything, each person has its own like little, you maybe we want like a male that has some bombastic voice, but then there's so many variations in that spectrum of how that sounds. So I guess you don't have to be too nitty-gritty about it and leave room for creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think yeah, a topic we already touched is the idea of sound pollution and sound ecology. So yeah, you shouldn't create like a wall of sound and overthink everything. Like, how can you have sound everywhere? So pick your battles, also sound wise, like, and loud music and a voiceover shouting your brand name. And I mean, yeah,
No, that's
that's
true. And
a
like
pitfall.
when I was reading your book, something I realized was really funny, that like once you do something two or three times, like for example in a podcast, I started my podcast and I just said for like the joke, like I say, buckle up and let's talk branding. And now after I think 150 episodes, that thing, like that buckle up thing, and it became like some kind of a logo. But that's only because I there was some room for spontaneity and creativity, I guess, to become that thing, right?
hmm But that's the cool thing, that some things can be initiated thanks to creativity, but then you can start to apply knowledge. For example, like you said, you've been saying this sentence for 150 times. That's rule number one: consistency. Um, like we say it in Flemish, right? Ja, telkens op dezelfde spijker
Yeah,
slaan.
keep hitting the same nail.
Yeah, but not too hard and not too much. But just, it's all about telling a consistent story. Actually, that's what it's about. And again, to make the analogy with a brand being a person, as a person, we evolve. I think you evolved over the past 10 years. I evolved as well, but we are the same people like deeper soul-based or heart-based or identity-based, but we are alive. Brands are alive as well. So yeah, they should keep on evolving just like human beings do.
Sure. I have two more questions, and we have a couple of sounds left, so we can see where we
Okay.
maybe mix them in, or maybe we can just do it after the questions. One question I had was, I think it does sound very, let's say, daunting for a lot of people in branding and marketing, or even company owners that think like, okay, maybe I do need to consider working with sound a little bit better, but maybe they don't have the budget to contact somebody like you, or Sonhouse, the agency you've co-founded. Like, how can you, or can you even, but can you start with doing sound yourself, sonic branding yourself, and where do you even start?
I think it starts with defining your own brands, because I came across a lot of companies that contacted Sonhouse to start a sonic branding process, and I asked them to send me the brand book, and they're like, we don't have a brand book. And then I asked them, what are your values, or what is your company about? It doesn't have to be always with fancy brand values. But then I ask this question to two people at the same company, and I get two different answers. One gives me the impression that they're about product leadership, and the other one gives me the impression that they're operational excellence. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but these are two totally different, strategic point of views. So the sounds will never be right.
Yeah.
So make sure that the fundament of your brand is there, and if you are all aligned internally on how you want to communicate and what is your message about, and also your positioning in the markets, then you can contact a musician or a sound designer, but then you need to make sure that this person speaks both languages, understands brands, understands music, and then you can apply the parameters of sounds. And there is this this model that I also talk about in my book, that talks about melody and tempo and rhythm, like I said a few minutes ago. This is already like a good starting point to create something. But I think, a real methodology would be the best way. And budget-wise, I think there are always solutions. I mean, Coca-Cola is not the same as a small SME company around the corner. So budget shouldn't really be an issue, I think. It's more about how translating the brand into sounds.
Yeah,
That's
start with the strategy, and then see what you can do budget-wise from that. My next question was going to be, how much does a Sonic brand cost, or a Sonic logo? Everybody wants to know that sort of stuff, but probably there's no one answer. Maybe just give us like the most expensive one that happened, and then maybe the cheapest one.
But I think the most expensive one must be the one that Hans Zimmer created.
Okay.
So we're talking about hundreds of thousands of euros. But I mean, it's also related to the media where you use this. Is it only like a podcast and it's something else? And if you're using this on television worldwide, but let's say that between 5 and 25k, you can do a lot of work.
Okay.
So if you compare this with the investments in visual identity or visual branding, I think it's okay. And on average, let's say 10, 15, something like that.
Yeah, no.
It depends on a few. It depends on a few characteristics again, or a few parameters.
Awesome. We have like some cool sounds left. Maybe we can just like, I'm gonna play the sound, and you can tell us what's happening if you think that's a good one to do.
Okay, exciting.
So what did we hear? Oh, we obviously it's water, but like, what's special about this sound?
Yeah, I found this really fascinating. So there is this difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is what you do in a passive way. Listening is what you do in an active way with your brain, not only with your ears, but really your brain. And now the two of us and the other people here were listening. And if you listen, you can tell the difference between cold and hot water. So maybe play it again.
I want to try. I want to try. Okay.
Cold and hot water.
Oh my god, I think it's the second one. First I was like, yeah, it's the first one, but then I think it's the second one. So damn it, I'm not good at this. I think it's the second one.
Well, the first one is cold water, and the second one is hot water. Yeah.
Okay, I was right. Oof.
Okay.
The second one made me think about coffee. I have no idea why.
Yeah, actually, it's because it sounds familiar. Yeah, our auditory database links this with associations and knowledge. The cold water is more viscous; it's thicker. The molecules are moving slower, and the hot water is the opposite. So that's why we can really tell the difference between cold and hot water.
That's so crazy. Okay, cool. We have some. What else do we have here? Let me just see. We have a bird song.
Yeah, the bird song.
The sound of silence. Well, it's not silence.
Yeah, it's not complete silence, but you could compare it with this. To me, it's maybe the most favorite sounds I have, because it gives a feeling of peace. Also, there is some evolution in this sound. When you hear a bird song, there is no dinosaur, there's no tsunami. Yeah, it gives a chill feeling. If you put this at home, you feel relaxed. Everything is okay, and the birds are singing their song. So it's always a good sign if the birds are singing.
I love that. I mean, it's something like I thought about it for a brand a couple of months ago where they have like this really zen vibe, and I was thinking like maybe we should put some really cool bird sounds on the website. But then again, like you don't want to get annoyed when you're surfing or doing some research on something, so it's not always a good idea. But I love the idea. Okay, wait, let me see. We have, of course.
We're all addicts. Yeah, the universe of Netflix has been opened in a few seconds. I think it's a really strong one. It's let's say a modern approach, where you also, I think, have the gut feeling, like a sound designer who created this, not like a song that was created for Netflix with a declination that is like the logo. But I think it does the job.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really works in the Netflix world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of like when it comes to sonic branding, a lot of, for me, inspiring ones are often like the movie openers, probably because we've seen all of them. Like the what is the one that goes like boom, like really loud?
THX, yeah, that's the THX is the opposite of the Apple startup sound.
Okay, seriously?
Yeah.
That's cool.
The idea is the opposite. Really, if you look it up, you'll find it on the internet. But Netflix, I think they had the idea of creating their product in a digital world, laptops, smartphones, and so on, and not in the theatrical worlds. If you listen to other cinematic brands, let's say, most of the time you have an orchestral feeling, a big Hollywood feeling. Netflix has like a sound designish, electronic, simple logo. And now they even asked Hans Zimmer to make a new interpretation, because I think they have plans to go to the big screen as well. So you can look it up as well, the Hans Zimmer version of the Netflix sound logo.
That's awesome. That's so cool. We have, I think, two more sounds. This one. Yeah, that's really simple, but it's a big part of the whole UX of Slack, right?
Yeah, and again, I think gut feeling how it was created, but it works. I turned it off at some point because there was too much sound pollution in my world. Yeah, it gave me stress. Like
Yeah.
you're working on something and you hear this and like, oh no, there's a message and there's other work and multitask and oh no. But I think it's designed in a good way. It's gentle. It's not too intrusive, too pushy, and it's interesting to see how brands work on their product sounds, just like Nokia already did back in the days with the SMS sounds. Just like Kellogg's thinking about their sound, or Rice Krispies. If you pour milk on Rice Krispies, there's this sound. How Harley Davidson has tried to get a patent on their motorcycle sounds. These are product sounds, and I think really relevant to think about this.
Awesome. The last sound. Yeah, amazing sound.
You're some kind of the 7, no, Steph?
Yeah.
No,
but it's a cool sound.
Yeah, again, the universe. You see Miss Moneypenny, you see a chase, you see James Bond. This melody has been there for so many years, used in a consistent way, like we said, but also there is this thing that it's alive. Like we said, people are like brands. James Bond, there is this evolution also over time, but when he's in another place, when he's in India, there is another version of the melody than when he's in Belgium, for example, or in a club or skiing, but the melody remains. That's
and I think that's really the a powerful sound to end on, because it's really this idea that it's the Sonic brand doesn't have to tell the full story, but it's more like that anchor. You hear it and then it summons the whole world of the brand, which I think is very powerful, and also a great tool to keep that brand alive without having to tell a visual story, or even if you do both, it's very interesting. But I think it's a great tool in the arsenal of building brands.
Yeah, and it fits. And again, this was not created with a workshop or a brand analysis or whatsoever. But if it fits, it really enhances the brand, the story.
Awesome. I think we can wrap it up on that. If people want to reach out to you, Cedric, like where can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
My email address is cedric@sonhouse.com. I don't know if you can put it somewhere.
I'll pop it on the screen.
Yeah, or my Instagram sounds like Cedric. People can contact me there.
Awesome. And I'll definitely link up the book as well. I think it's a great book for people to read, not only like for branding, but just for this idea of paying attention to sound and what it means in our world. So I think it's a great thing. Thank you so much for your time. This was really cool.
Pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks.